Hello coaches, welcome back to another Modern Soccer Coach interview. Today we're talking to Darren Rhodes, lead academy scout at Preston North End. He's going to talk about his scouting report that he put together that I saw on LinkedIn. If you want a copy of the scouting report, Darren has kindly gave us a copy for all the coaches. You can get it on the link below for free. No problem at all on the Modern Soccer Coach website. When you're there, check out the stuff on modernsoccercoach.com. Please give this a like. Please subscribe if you haven't already. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe. Means a lot. Here is Darren. Enjoy. Darren, thanks so much for joining me today on the Modern Soccer Coach podcast. Really excited to have you on.
Thanks for having me. It's an honour to be on. So a little bit out of my comfort zone, this, but I'm looking forward to it. It's good to chat with you.
No, it's great. It's great. You're a young coach, analyst, and ambitious to grow in the game, and something that we just spoke off air as opportunities and et cetera. But the comfort zone part of it, I would say, is something that I gravitated towards your report because, like I said, we talk so much about scouting. There's a lot out there, but people actually putting practical work examples out in the community is few and far between. And then you put something out on LinkedIn or a good report that I really enjoyed looking at. You asked for some feedback. I thought the feedback was really interesting, and we're going to get into it. I'll link the link to the report below this here so coaches can have a look at the report. The first question I want to ask you was basically layout, and I know you're on an academic route as well as your coaching work as well. And where have you got this initial framework from, and how did you put it together?
It's actually my first opposition report, that one. So just rewinding back to what you said, it was a bit daunting putting it out there online. But yeah, I think just with it being my first one, I kind of just looked at it as if I was the head of analysis at a club, or if I was head of recruitment, what type of things would I want to see? What would I find valuable to learn about an opposition? Just started from there really, and just started to build and expand from that. I think just really kind of having in mind what I thought I would find useful if I was in that role. Just started to build from there really. Like I said, it's my first one, so I'm certain there'll be bits missing. There's probably some bits where I might have gone into too much detail or not enough detail, but and that really was the reason for putting it out there online as well, because LinkedIn's a massive space, isn't it, that can be used for all sorts of networking. But I thought, connected with quite a few experienced, various different people in football, and I just thought if one of them comes back and offers me some sort of feedback, can then take that on and hopefully progress into my next report as well. So
yeah, LinkedIn's a great space, I think, for analysis and genuine people who are working in the game and that are trying to share information in the game. I in my opinion, I think it's overtaken Twitter as a platform for analysis.
Yeah, to be fair, I'm quite new to LinkedIn. Definitely since starting university, I think. The more you hear people talk about it and the opportunities that you can get through it as well, and just linking in with like-minded professionals as well, sharing that common interest. I've in the past couple of months, I have kind of gravitated towards. Instead of waking up and scrolling through Instagram now, I have a quick scroll through LinkedIn to see what's going on.
We're not. Just to be clear, this episode isn't sponsored by LinkedIn, but I do the same thing. I've now downloaded it on my phone and I've deleted Twitter, and now I don't spend a lot of time on it, but I just generally find that it's straight up football content, more specific to the area you're in. Yeah, the aspect of where you started, I'm really interested in. You mentioned there about information, too much, too little, and obviously that there kind of gets a little bit of dialogue with feedback. I'm really interested in how these are structured and how they're laid out, and basically what your starting point is. And you started in, I thought was really unique, where you've talked about the match conditions, pitch conditions, alongside recent results, and then recent lineups. Is it a UK thing that the match conditions because of the weather and pitches over there, or what's your thoughts behind that?
To be fair, like I said, this was my first opposition report, and it's not something that I do in my part-time role as a scout. I'm employed as a grassroots and academy scout, so my focus generally is to go and watch individual players rather than watch teams. So again, it was just kind of going back to what type of things, if I was reading this report, what type of things would I find useful? And I think, if teams have a certain style of play, it's great to look at the result of the match and say, oh yeah, this happened and this is perhaps why it happened and these things could have happened. But if you look at things, so if you've got like a particular style of play that's suited to a slippery surface, so if you like to move the ball around fast and you was on a slippery surface, has that then contributed to the result? I guess you'd never know because you've played the match on that pitch and on that surface. You can't play that exact game again on a different pitch, so you don't know if the result will be different, but could have helped. Or again, if you're looking at the form of teams, they could have been on a 4-match winning streak and then come up against a team where it's not unheard of for managers to instruct the groundsman to grow the grass a little bit longer for certain games. And so then you can kind of contrast the two and say, oh, well, yeah, if you're looking at the form, this team might have lost there, but they was playing away and it was a really, a really windy night and this team likes to play long balls. So it might not be, but I just thought, could that be a contributing factor to results or in particular how that result played out on that night as well? So.
The form guide is really interesting. That's something that I've probably over only about the last 12 months have I started seriously looking at that before going into an opposition report, because, and I don't know how you feel about this, you might disagree with this. I feel that the worse the results, the more variances in the team's setups. And in my experience, the better, if a team's coming off a 5-game, 3-game winning streak, you see more consistencies with behaviours and lineups. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I completely agree. If it's that old adage, isn't it? If it's not broke, don't fix it. So yeah, and conversely, if the team is off the back of a 3-match losing streak, the manager might be trying something different in that game as well. So I don't think. I mean, listen, form can't be the most important thing. Otherwise, all the bookmakers would be going out of business, wouldn't they? The form books consistently being ripped up. But I think it can be a contributing factor, like you say. If something's been going well for a team, they may be consistently using the same lineup, using the same playing style, same tactics. And again, if things have been going wrong, they might bring in some youth players. They might try a different style of play. So I think with the opposition report, I think just information is key there. I think there's many different parts of information you can pull to try and build that report, and that was just one. I can't say that I've read extensively other opposition reports to say that, I've noticed that they all mention the weather or the form or the pitch conditions. But for myself, I just thought it could be something that could be of interest. I think the key thing to the opposition reports is that you might give it to a manager. You might spend. I spent quite a few hours on doing that opposition report. You could spend quite a few hours doing the opposition report, and the manager could just read the back page, go through the strengths and weaknesses. It kind of depends on the club that you're working for and their philosophy and how much of that information they want to actually absorb. But I think if you can put as much information as possible in that opposition report, then it's then up to the reader to decide which bits of it they want to use.
No, I completely agree. I think as an analyst, I think you've got to be okay then, or a scout, you've got to be okay probably spending a good 6-7 days looking and going through and being up late and being okay with the fact that you might sit on the desk and it might not be opened, or you might send something that they may not be as enthusiastic about it as you are, because ultimately that's up to your responsibility is up to the coach, right? It's not up to you to wow anyone. It's the information that you're trying to get consistent.
Yeah, sure. But like I said, with this opposition report and the next couple that I'm planning to do, they aren't really for a club. I've not been asked to do them by anybody. So I kind of am. It's me trying to upskill, trying to add a bit more to my my scouting skills. So I kind of am just going and doing it how I would want to receive it. But then, if you was working for a club, I would imagine that the club would have certain criteria that they would want you to be looking for. So yeah, I guess there's no real right opposition report, is there? It's what's right for the receiver, basically.
Yeah, well, it brings us along nicely, because what you're saying is what clubs want. Like the two things that I think are non-negotiables today are shape and data. Like, how does it align? And you've got both of them in there. Interesting thing with shape is when you see shape, or when you're presenting shape for coaches in your eyes, and you say like how you would like to receive it, would you look at shapes and formations? Would you look at in possession, out of possession? Would you do both? Changes that are made? How would you navigate around that crazy world?
For me personally, I'm a massive overthinker, so I would want all of the bits of the information, and I would probably study it for hours and hours and hours, trying to figure out how we can utilize all that information to win the match. So if I was receiving, I would want as much information, whether that's in possession, out of possession, how they set up at corners, free kicks, and then try and again, I don't know. Again, I think it goes back to the club that you're at. So if you're at a club that, let's say for argument's sake, a Man City, who are the European champions, Premier League champions, going into the World Club Championship, it's fair to assume that they have belief in their own ability. So I wonder how much they actually concentrate on what the opposition can do to them, because they know that they have the firepower within the ranks to hurt an opposition. Whereas if you're a team struggling at the bottom of the division, you might be more concentrating on how you can stop a team doing what they normally do. So I think it has to be with context, really. But for me personally, I would want to know how can we hurt them? What are the weaknesses? Can we identify them? How can we impose our game on them? And at the same time, how can we stop them from doing what they normally do? And I guess you'd probably have to try and find somewhere in the middle to deploy your tactics.
Hello, coaches. You asked and we delivered. One of the most popular requests we get on this channel is pass and warm-ups. And it's not the regular slow way to be passing exercises. No, what coaches are looking for is the one-touch, intricate combination type exercises with that emphasis on quality, technique and tempo. So we have decided to put 30 of these exercises together and release them on an ebook that you can get access to right away. If you're a youth coach who's looking for some extra technical work, or you're even a college coach or a club coach working with older players looking for some warm-up exercises or some pictures to align with your tactical objectives, we can help you out. Our new ebook, 30 passing practices, is available on the link below. It's a PowerPoint that includes video, session details, and coaching points on each slide. Tons of ideas, tons of different pictures, lots of adaptions. You can get it on the link below or at modernsoccercoach.com/shop. Thanks for the support and enjoy. I really like the individual aspects of your report. A couple of questions on that there. Someone, you've written quite, like you said, about a lot of information. There's quite a bit of information, and a lot of the feedback that you got was, hey, little bit text heavy in certain aspects of it. And that's an area, another reason why I really connected with the report is because it's something that I've been thinking of quite a lot recent years almost, is now I think the writing's got a lot of value because someone's got to read it. and if they've got to read it, they got to spend time. And if you have something in its place, someone might just glance over it. So, what's your thoughts on the feedback about the text? And I guess, do you agree with that feedback, or do you still feel strongly that the text needs to be there?
Again, I think going back to the fact that this is something that I'm doing voluntarily, and nobody has asked me to go out and do it. I've designed it how I would want to receive it, but I think we all learn in different ways, don't we? Some people prefer to read, some people prefer to see the diagrams, the graphs, the charts. In terms of that feedback, I kind of just took it as that's that person's opinion, their preferred learning style. I think I would back myself that I could create a report that was very text heavy, or I could create a report that was graphic heavy. Could do something that's in between. And I think it goes back to who's asking you to do the report, because ultimately they will probably give the instruction of, this is going to go to the manager. He will literally spend 5 minutes with it. We want as much imagery as possible so he can get back on the grass. Or it might be the case that, the manager likes to spend, he puts aside 2 hours during the week to have a good read of the report. So depends who's asking you to do it into how you lay out the reports, I think. But the way that I did it in my report is because I've not done it under anybody's instruction. I've done it how I would like to receive it. So I think there probably is a balance in between the two. I think particularly with things like the stats, so there's things like XG, attempted crosses, that sort of stuff. That could be probably condensed into a bit of a smaller area and just represented by graphs. But then also you don't get any context really from data. So I think there has to be that written word as well to kind of explain what's going on in the graph. That makes sense.
100%. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I would definitely be like, I think reading it is really, really powerful, but I would be so biased in that there. Like I've always enjoyed reading about football, I enjoy reading match reports. But what also jumped out to me was your language. Like I've read a lot of scouting reports, and actually quite recently was giving feedback to a young analyst. I was telling them that it's how you generalize is good, bad. That's not I hate the subjective versus objective, because both of them have a value. But saying something's good and something's bad or something's great, and then overgeneralizing that it happens all the time, when in a match that, if you get 3 behaviors in a certain way, it's a lot. No one does everything all the time. That just at the elite level, there's so much variance in these games. Your language was excellent. I thought your language was fantastic. Is that something that you're learning to develop, or is that something that you're just, that comes natural?
I agree with what you're saying. The devil's in the detail, isn't it? So you could have, I'm trying to think of an example now. You could have 2 sprinters, take it away from football. You could have 200-meter sprinters, let's say in the Olympics. Well, they're both good because they're in the Olympics, both good sprinters. Only one of them can win. So what makes the one who wins the better sprinter? And I think, if you can fall into a trap of generalizing attributes when you're scouting. I wouldn't say it's something that I consciously try with, but I think going back to what you said there, not everybody does everything all of the time. And so you might see something in a game, something that a player does in a game. The game's been played for 90 minutes, and if you've only seen it once, you can't say, well, this player's excellent at doing this all of the time, because you've only seen it once in 90 minutes. You can say, on occasion, player X did action X, Y, and Z, and had some success from it. And I think I kind of learned that, maybe subconsciously, I think, through the role that I've had up to now. So my my previous experience in scouting is I've always been an academy scout. So working with grassroots players and academy players, you're going out and watching the individual player, and then you have to put recommendations on that player to try and get them into the club. And so if you say, oh, this, again, let's just use sprinting for an example. This player is a really good sprinter, and then comes into the academy environment and perhaps isn't as good a sprinter as everyone else that we've got there. You're kind of then responsible for what you put in the report of saying, oh, he's a really good sprinter. So I think you always have to kind of give context to that, to say, on today's viewing, from what I saw, player X displayed the ability to be able to sprint. Kind of saying the same thing, but you're just not being very general with it. You're going right into the detail. And I'm using sprinting just as an example off the top of my head, but you could use that with passing, shooting. For example, if you say, "Oh, player X is an excellent finisher," and then he goes into, and it might have been in that game that you was watching, but then goes into the academy and can't hit a barn door. That's a reflection on me as a scout then, because head of recruitment's looking at me and saying, he said he was an excellent finisher. So you can't. I don't think you can say with confidence, unless you go and watch a player in every single match in his life and then reflect back on it and say, "Oh, yeah, he was an excellent finisher." I think you just need to give facts, not opinions. Say what you saw there and then, and what you believe that could translate into. It's not something that I consciously try and do. It's just I think over time, just perhaps having my guard up about perhaps Scout's reputation and things like that, and ultimately wanting to stay in the job. Yeah. So you've kind of got to protect your reputation in that sense. So it's probably just evolved from that, I would say.
The reason why I asked is well, obviously it stood out to me, and I wanted to say that, but I wonder, is it being taught? And if it's not being taught, I think it needs to be taught, because you mentioned there about accuracy and you also credibility. And if you're reading a report, even alongside data where you've got, like you say, about subjectivity and objectivity, but I've seen data reports saying the player always shoots centrally. We've got data to match that up. Like, all right, brilliant. So that it all should be central shots. And there's a heavy density of central shots. And there's 3, 4, 5, whatever. Well, those aren't objectively not central shots. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, you just got to be very careful with your word. And so in that example, you could be player X often chooses to shoot centrally. You're kind of saying the same thing, aren't you? But you're just kind of guarding yourself as well, because form can change in football. Who you think is an excellent player over the past 3 games might pick up an injury and never get back to themselves. But if you put in writing, oh, this player is X, Y, and Z, you're kind of accountable for that. So, yeah, I always try and be factual rather than opinionated. Yeah. I saw this, rather than, oh yeah, he's good at. So yeah, it's a very slight nuance, isn't it? But it makes a lot of difference. And I think as well, just going back to the generalizations, it's my job. If I see going to the academy scouting, if I see a player who I believe has potential, it's my job to get them into the academy. And so if my report just says he's good at this, he's good at that, he's bad at that, probably going to get ripped up and thrown in the bin. I want my head of recruitment to be excited about, or as excited as I have been about watching the player. So I think the more you can kind of get that across in your message with more descriptive words than just good, bad, indifferent. So again, that probably just feeds into the way I naturally just write the reports, I guess.
It's really interesting. Like, I don't think it's not creative writing in terms of, you're not having to make a story up what player X received in half space. But at the same time, you're right. Like, you've got to be able to engage a reader on, if we're going to talk about the written word, and you said it before about data. If you present data as data, then I just think that's that's a data provider's job almost, like a Y Scout, a StatsBomb can provide that. The advantages of a scout is that the scout has the ability to see and the ability to analyze and spot trends and give context, and there's so much value to both. But if you're putting them both together, then your language has to be on point. And I'm really fascinated by the fact that if your language is, like you said there, if you don't have data, so let's talk about that. You don't have data to go to an under 15 game to scout. What advantages does data give you when you have it, and how do you have to make that up? Like, can you compare the two worlds?
When you have it, you got to be very careful with it, because like we said before, data doesn't give you context, it does just give you raw numbers. So when you have it, how I like to use it, I can only really speak in like these opposition reports that I've been doing, or any other practice reports that I've been doing. I like to use it to confirm what I've seen. So if a player passes the eye test and I'm interested in the player, I will then maybe have a look at the data and does it back up what I think I've seen. That's an advantage to it. I would tend not to use it the other way around. So I wouldn't look at the data first and then go and watch the player, because it's almost giving you a bias, and there's no context to it. So you could have, let's say, if you're going to look at a winger and the data says, he's got 90% successful dribbles in this match. So in your head, you're thinking, interesting, I'm looking for a winger. The player can dribble, but it doesn't tell you what happens after that dribble. Might have run it out on past the corner flag, on 8 of those occasions. And so I think you've got, if you look at the data first and then try and watch the player afterwards, I think sometimes you can unconsciously try to see the things that you've already seen in the data. Whereas for me, I like to watch the player and then see if I can confirm what I think I've seen using the data. Like I say, we don't have that in grassroots football, so it is very, very different. And you kind of you can't. So you'll go and watch a match, let's say, without any target players in mind. Make your reports on the match. If a player particularly stands out, you might then go and follow them up. And in that situation, I'll be looking to reinforce what I thought I saw in the first game, but then also watch with a bit more, maybe focus more on that player rather than the match itself, and just like really drill down into what it is that they do that is good, or where they can improve. You don't have data to help you with that in grassroots and academy football, so it really is just a case of collating your reports. So I'll probably go, if it's a player of interest, I will probably go anything between 2 to 4 times to watch them before I make a decision either way. And it's really then just a case of reflecting on my previous reports and have I consistently seen the things that I like, or has the player been very up and down, in which case it might be we'll monitor them for a bit longer. So yeah, it's kind of just going off what you see, but not being impulsive with it, having a bit of a case study to look back on and say, let's say if we're talking about shooting, he was an accurate shooter in game 1, game 2, game 3, game 4. Right, okay, that kind of confirms what I thought about him then. So it is data in a sense, but it's your own data. It's the stuff that you've recorded, the stuff that you've noted down, and then to go back and reflect on that.
Yeah, it's what the definition of data is. I'm reading a book at the minute on tanking to the top. Philadelphia 76ers NBA team basically losing on purpose to secure higher draft picks. And I thought I wouldn't enjoy it, and I'm just glued to it. I just can't wait to read it every night. And one of the interesting things is that they've got a data guy who's running it, and it's what he's defining as data to get his information. He's he's still got the old school NBA scouts, but he's placing a premium on every single data point. Like a player's attitude, body language is a data point. And sometimes I think that linking that back to soccer is that there's always going to be an extreme when people are trying to present whether are we all going to go in the data direction? Are we all going to keep watching? But I think the ability to navigate between both is obviously going to be very, very important, even at the youth level, I would suspect, in the next 5 years.
Yeah, definitely. I do think as technology evolves and the game evolves, I do see it going more the data way. The higher up, the higher you go, I think it is going to be more data led. But I don't think your traditional scouts would ever be replaced. I think, like you said before, if all you wanted was the data, you could just go and pay a Y Scout or Opta for that. You need somebody to be able to interpret that data and then translate it almost into footballing terms as to what it means. Things like your XG, your expected assists, your expected goal involvement, things like that. Like you need to kind of take that information and then translate it into football language for the people who want to use that information. I think so. I think the role of the scout might change slightly, but I don't think the traditional scout will ever be surplus to requirements. Hopefully,
I don't think so either. Even to go an extra layer on that, I would say that what the scout gives you beyond the game itself, the connections to maybe an agent, credibility. I just finished a chapter in the book last night where because they were cutting a lot of players and the club had a reputation of a lot of movement, an agent didn't want to send their players to them for a tryout, which was almost unheard of in NBA land. And a scout can help give you information that, hey, listen, they're on the hook with this club or something like that there. And those informal pieces of information, I would imagine, are really, really, really beneficial in a recruiting landscape, even at youth level.
100%, 100%. Going and finding the best footballer on the pitch is probably the easiest part of the job. Most people could do that. Most people can go and identify who's a good player. The difficulty, not the difficulty, but I think where a scout shows their strengths is with their networking, with their information. Can you be in the right place at the right time? Particularly with grassroots football, you could be covering a vast area. If you don't have any network of any sort of description, you're kind of going and watching blind. Because I don't know what it's like over in America, but with the youth football over here, they don't publish results or league tables up until under 12s, which I'm fully behind. The kids should be playing for fun and not for results. But in terms of wanting to kind of gauge where the good teams and the good players are, that's without a sort of network, that's practically impossible for a scout. So if you have a network of people around who might give you a call on a Saturday night and say, oh, you want to get down to such and such on Sunday morning and watch Team X for Player Z, it makes your job so much easier. So I think that networking part of it is crucial. And like I say, data can't give you that. I think the big thing as well is looking at the psychological corner of the player. I've not researched into it, so I'm not 100%, but I'd struggle to see where data would help you with that. So, for example, how resilient is the player? How did he face certain challenges? What's the temperament like? You could maybe get a gauge for it from data, but going and watching that and seeing that with the eye, I think is the best way of gauging that. And it's an important thing that you're looking for, especially if you're looking to take a player into an academy. It's a different environment, for us to do our due diligence, we kind of need to be as sure as we can that the players can handle that emotionally, psychologically. You can never be sure, but I don't think as far as I'm aware, there isn't any data out there that can help you with that. That's kind of just watching the game and seeing how the player reacts to certain situations. So,
yeah, I learned that as a college recruiter. I worked at a school, and I was an assistant coach, and I'd come from being a head coach at a Division 2 school. This was Division 1. And it was Nate Lee, his name is. I'm sure a lot of American listeners will know. He just actually got the job at Kansas, big college job. And I had, as a head coach of a smaller school, it was just talent evaluation. You know, you go there and you see a player and you try and get them signed. But this was a bigger school with a bigger infrastructure. Division 1, it was being recruited earlier and a lot more competitive in terms of the recruiting landscape. And he sent me, I'll never forget it, he sent me to Detroit, Michigan for my first kind of recruiting assignment. And I was actually disappointed during the match that there was better players than the one that he sent me to. And they hadn't committed to schools. So I went back and I was like, listen, watch the player, but why didn't you send me to watch 2 or 3 other players? There was 2 or 3 other players. About bang, 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 named what they were going to do. They just hadn't committed yet. All the information. Then knew that player that we were watching could get a different deal, who was looking for a different major, and all these things that I went away going, it would have took me a month to research all what he said. He didn't have 10 minutes. He didn't even tell me it, you know. What my learning was, and what I think was really cool, it gives you a little bit of humility that I think sometimes the data not gets you lazy, but sometimes it gets you a false sense of security that that's enough. But in reality of professional football, we just talked about it with the scout, like you need to constantly check, recheck, question, challenge, all these things, because that's how you get the coach what they want at the end of the day.
Sure. It's an important tool to have in your toolbox, but you need the toolbox, I think. I don't think you can overlook the data, but I would be hesitant to rely solely on it as well, would be my evaluation.
See, when you're talking about the report for your current role with Preston North End, and you don't have to go into specifics of what that is, but comparing that to a scouting report where you have the video and the visuals and the data, even taking visuals and video out of it, what would a report for a young recruitment, what would that entail? Like visually, how would that look in terms of a layout?
Yeah, not much. So we don't do visual reports like the ones that are posted on LinkedIn. It's normally a case of type it up on my notes on my mobile whilst I'm watching, just very shorthand bullet points, things that will remind me to expand on when I write my proper report. And then every club, every professional club in England uses a system called the PMA. It's issued by the Premier League. I think it stands for Player Manager Application, but I might be wrong on that one. It's basically a central database. So you go and put your report on there. It then emails it straight through to the head of recruitment, sends it through to coaches, etc. So it's kind of held on the just as a like Word format, if you will. But then let's say if you're at a club and 3 or 4 different scouts end up reporting on the same player and it's all positive, that kind of rings an alarm bell for the head of recruitment to like, well, 4 different people have seen this player now and all said the same thing. We maybe need to be making a move. So it kind of, it gets uploaded onto there. And then the club can use that for other tools as well. So not our report as such, but the application, the database that it's on, they can, if a player comes in on trial with the club, they can give feedback to the player and the player's parents via the same application. So it is just you're constantly just adding to the database, if you will. But that's where we send our reports into.
Do you think in 10 years with with obviously the rise of the video providers and the AI and the fact that with these cameras you can set them up and they'll probably be automatically tracking players without GPS in the next whatever years. Do you think that your world of youth recruitment will start to change where you will be adding more video to the report, or do you think that's even needed at that age?
It's difficult, really, isn't it? Because I think so. My role is kind of split in two. One is where I'll go and watch grassroots footballers, so that's literally your amateur football, and then the other side is going and watching academy games, so other professional clubs' academy players. I think on the academy side, I think definitely the higher up you go, where the money is, can't see any reason why technology wouldn't be implemented and advanced in that way. Those players were already in that environment, and perhaps is another challenge for them to face, to see how they kind of how they react to knowing that, well, I'm being filmed in almost everything that I do. Because I guess if you make it as a professional footballer, chances are you're at least on match of the day once a week with everybody watching what you're doing. So, on that side of things, I think it would be. I can't see any reason why not. In the grassroots game, I don't know. I think there has to be. I don't want to professionalize it too much, and I think if you start turning up at your local park with all the cameras and the analysis tools, don't get me wrong, most players would love to become a professional footballer, but some are just playing for fun, want to be playing with their friends. And I think if you take all that tech and all those advancements into the grassroots game, you're almost professionalizing it for them, which is kind of contradictory to what they're trying to do, I think. So I wouldn't like to see it come into grassroots football. Even in terms of when I'm attending as a scout, I'll communicate with the manager before I attend so that they know that I'm going to be there. Other than that, I try and be as incognito as possible. But I think the players, especially at that age, should just be enjoying the game, I think, and not be worrying about the pressures that come if you do end up making it as a pro, because there's plenty of time for that later on. Yeah,
I was thinking more of it from the club basically provides, in 2035, or every club going to upload their footage and have a server, and then all of a sudden, then you've got instead of having a Y Scout where you've got a professional older player, senior player on there, do you have Y Scout for a 7-8-year-old, and I'm guessing the same answer is professionalizing it to a stage where it's so you take away a lot of it.
And I guess you've probably got the safeguarding risks as well.
Oh yeah,
Probably some children who don't want to be recorded or aren't allowed to be recorded, who has access to that data. I think the technology being there is a good tool for those that want to use it, but I think that's the key, is they should have the choice of if they want to use it. Whereas if it's just brought in at club level, and regardless of who you are, you're going to be filmed. Not every player wants that. Not every player wants that. So I haven't considered it before, but just thinking on my feet, I think. I mean, you'll see it on YouTube. There'll be players who, they will film their own games and they'll clip them up and they'll put together a nice little highlights reel and they'll send it off to agents. They'll send it off to scouts. I think they're being proactive, and they obviously have a goal that they want to achieve, and they probably don't mind the professionalism side of it. But I would say that they're choosing to do that. Whereas if the club or if the league implemented it and it was a blanket thing, don't know. I don't know if those that are just playing for fun. Don't know if you maybe lose some players from the game there, which obviously we wouldn't want to see. So
sure,
yeah,
for sure. Interesting topic. Last couple for you. you're alongside your work and in the recruitment and scouting, you're also then doing your study at UCFB as well. What?
Yeah.
And I spoke to you before we started recording about the fact that in America, where the land of a lot of investment and a lot of video and a lot of scouting, actually there's not many schools, if any, that I know of that have football analysis, soccer analysis. What's the biggest kind of areas that the educational route has helped you when you're kind of living that experience at the same time?
I think gives you the reasoning why you're doing a lot of things. I think so, especially when we're in seminars and lectures. I feel like I have the experience that that would be taught. I'm by far the oldest one in my in my class, by the way. But so, yeah, I feel I have the experience of the things that are being talked about, but never. I guess never really known why I've been doing those things, or it's kind of just been like, well, this is what you do. Whereas when you go and you're in that academic setting and you're really drilling down into the whys and whats and the theory side of it, kind of gives you a bit more of an awareness of, well, I have been doing those things, subconsciously not knowing that I should have been doing those things anyway, but now I know why I'm doing them and to what end, how it's benefiting me, how it's benefiting the player, how it's benefiting the club that I'm working for. So yeah, it definitely helped with the rationale side of things, I would say. UCFB, I think they're celebrating maybe the 10th year this year. So even they themselves, it's a relatively new thing to be able to go to a university and study football. It definitely wasn't around when I left school. I would have been there much earlier if it was. But yeah, no, I just think it's a great opportunity. The game's growing, it's changing, it's evolving, and I think the more people we can educate to get into those roles within clubs, the better for me.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. It's moving that fast that, to teach, how long's mathematics been around and syllabus around out there, my kids come home. I have a 7-year-old who's coming home with math now. It looks a lot different to what I was learned. Thankfully I don't have to do any of it with them.
Yeah.
Whenever
I can imagine.
Football is moving so fast that I would think that to try and keep up with that and then tier it to where you're teaching it, it's amazing. Yeah. That's an art in itself.
Yeah. No, again, I think probably the syllabuses and the classes that they teach will probably look different in 3 years' time to what they do now, and they probably look different now to what they did 3 years ago. Because, like you said, there's always different things happening in football, isn't there? That's why, it's the beautiful game, isn't it? Because it never stands still. It's always evolving. There's always something new to learn. So I'm enjoying being a student of the game.
Someone's going to listen to this and say, we need to add analysis writing, thanks to this interview, because we've our thoughts. Probably not. Last one for you, the coach analyst role, big talking point over the last few years about people upskill in different areas. How do you see that? You mentioned before we started recording about that's an area that you want to make sure that you get the coaching side of it as well. How important is it? Do you think it's a difference maker right now, or do you think it's almost a necessity?
I think to be a successful analyst, I think you need some level of coaching experience, especially if you look at, let's say, the player analysis route, performance analysis. If you're going to go to a player with an iPad and say, you did this, and this good, but you could have done this, and this better. I think firstly, you need to understand what this, and this is and how it contributes to the game. But secondly, if you want that buy-in from the player, I think you need to have served your time in a sense. If you was to go in there with no coaching experience, it's kind of how do you get the buy-in from the player? How does the player trust you? I think you wouldn't get a manager, or it'd be very rare that you would find a manager who goes in and manages a football club who has had no experience in football. They might have not been a great player, but they probably have played the game up to some level. So I think to be a good analyst, you do need that coaching knowledge. I don't think it goes the other way around. I don't think you need to have been a good analyst to become a good coach. But for me, I'm on a learning journey at the moment. I'm just trying to upskill in as many areas as I can, see which bits I find interesting, see where I'd like to take that career. But I think the more bits and pieces you can pull from each role and each role within a club, I think the more you can learn from them. Definitely for somebody who's looking to get into the football industry full time, it can only help, I think, because the more moving parts you understand, the more valuable you can be to a club, would be my opinion. If I was hiring somebody, I would look for somebody who has shown that desire to learn extra bits and pieces, not just tick the boxes to get where they need to be, kind of thing. So, and I love football, so for me, like, it's not really a chore to go and learn all the other bits and pieces about it, I guess.
Brilliant, great way to finish it. Thank you so much, Darren. It's been absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed it. Enjoyed kind of getting your thoughts behind everything, and then obviously your journey and your insights on different aspects of it. First class. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.